And welcome into the Radio Days edition of Now and Next. This week, sitting at the Roundtable on Moore in the Morning on NEWSTALK 1010 Toronto.
Let's actually start with the rail conversation we've just been having. And there's the waterfront LRT, but I want to start with the high-speed train. Tim Hudak, I think this is, I hate the expression, but it literally is game-changing. I don't know why Pierre Poilievre would be so foursquare against it, but I guess he is. Do we have Tim Hudak? No?
Yeah, I hit
we go.
mute. I'm trying.
What are you, new to this platform?
Rookie.
Yeah. And that was my best 15 seconds you're going to get too, John. So we'll warn you. Look, monorail, right? Like, is this actually going to be a monorail project? It intrigues me. I'd like to hear the objections. I do remember when I was opposition leader in Ontario, the then McGuinty Liberals had proposed a high-speed train, I think, from Ottawa down to Windsor. And, I raised concerns about if this was just a dream project without really good grounding in math, and suggested instead we use existing lines and expand the frequency of rail between Ottawa and Toronto, and then take out some of build around where it was dense with commercial so passengers could get across, without having to stop and go on the side for commercial traffic to pass. So we'll see what he has to say, but I think it is a valid argument to make. I'd like to see more details on the critique.
Dave Trafford, the project is called Alto, and the guy who's in charge of repping it was in studio with me for about 15 minutes a couple of weeks ago and convinced me, at the very least, that this is no longer one of those pipe dream projects, one of those silly ideas, that actually it might happen.
We're traveling to Europe later this month, and this is just part of our plan. The high-speed rail in Europe is just part of the way you get around, and it's efficient, it's easy, it's convenient, all of those things. And so the degree to which it gets used in Europe, and we seem to kind of reinvent the freaking wheel every time we start talking about this. Yes, we need to do it. I think there's some debate around, where the stops are and where the actual line is going to run, and do we have it in, sort of farm sensitive areas. I think those are legitimate conversations, but just to throw it out with the bathwater, I think is a little premature.
Yeah, and Tamara Cherry, with love to the people of Peterborough, I'm still not sure why it goes to Peterborough.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. But I think that what this does for Pierre Poilievre, bottom line is whether or not this train project goes ahead, it's got him into the headlines today. And he is living in a news cycle right now with our very statesman-like prime minister, taking a lot of headline space up. And he's in a battle for relevancy. And now with Avi Lewis at the helm of the NDP, I'm not saying that he's going to be staying in the headlines, but he certainly is right now. Pierre Poilievre needs to be making headlines. And I think that when he's talking to especially not just his base, but anybody who's feeling the pinch at the grocery store and whatnot these days, it is a smart move for him to be coming up and saying this is going to cost $8,000 per family. And I think he had a line in his news conference, something along the lines of, people can spend $8,000 on a lot better things than on this rail line. And when he is saying that, there's people out here in Saskatchewan where I am and the rest of the country that are thinking, yeah, I can spend $8,000 on a lot more than a rail line for people at the center of the universe. So I think it is smart politicking. I don't know that he actually agrees with what he is saying.
Speaking of the expense of transit, new figures suggest constructing an LRT on the eastern portion of Toronto's waterfront is going to cost an absolute fortune. Dave Trafford, I'll start with you on this one. I thought it was a really interesting conversation we had with an infrastructure expert just a few minutes ago on the show, where he pointed out that in Europe, somehow they managed to pull this kind of stuff off for much, much less.
Again, you go back to the culture of the travel and transportation in Europe versus North America. We're more married to the car in terms of how we get around. And let's face it, getting across Canada is not like getting across France. So that's one part of it. But the idea of public transit, the comparisons between Toronto, Montreal in terms of the two specific projects, I think are a little out of whack because, as you described, just around Union Station, half the cost is just going to be, working around and expanding the facilities around Union Station. I come back, though, to the idea that this is something that we need to do. The key, though, for the criticism that came down, it was more or less around the process. It was how well we were planned, lining things up in order so people aren't standing around leaning on a shovel waiting for somebody else to make a delivery or finish a job so that they can continue. And I have heard that scenario several times from guys I know who work with and for Metrolinx over the years. It's not that's one of the bigger problems that they've got. They've got a contractor who's dug a hole and nobody there to put the cement in it. And I'm paraphrasing, but that is a real issue, and that's a time killer and just kills the budgets.
And Tamara Cherry, it's true. I find myself reflecting. I remember when it took an extra 5 years to finish off Union Station, and I thought that's 5 years of person hours. Like, those people show up for work every single day and get paid. Ditto for the Eglinton Crosstown.
Yes. And my husband, who has for many years ago, when I first met him, he was working in the trades, and then he went into advertising, and now he's actually gone back to the trades. And it's been really interesting to see him working on these really big projects. And when there is a certain trade that is getting ready to come in on the project, like my husband's a plumber, then everybody's doing overtime to make sure that they get done so that the next person's ready to go. And then they get to take a little bit of a break, not a break, but then they're just working regular 40-hour work weeks. And then they're getting ready for the next people to come. So to think about these big publicly funded projects dragging their feet like this, I don't know how they get away with it when there's so many other projects that do it right.
Tim Hudak, you've certainly been associated with, not directly, but I mean in government and elsewise in construction of major infrastructure. And I guess people can be forgiven for being somewhat jaundiced about this new project and what it's going to cost.
Yeah, but you do pay it, right? I mean, the lifetime of a subway project is what, 80 to 100 years? So just like you pay for your mortgage over 20, 30 years when you amortize, it's even longer for this. So I think the math actually does work out here. I've been a proponent of this project, John, and when I was CEO at the Ontario Real Estate Association, we put this in our top 10 projects that we needed to see to help people get to work faster and to encourage more investment and more housing. And on the housing side, I mean, the Portlands is going to open up probably about 75,000 new spots for young families and individuals in the city of Toronto. And we can't forget this line also goes from the Portlands, right, not only to Union, but it also is going to go, west past Harbourfront to Island Airport and link in with the Ontario line. So it is an ambitious price tag, but it's an ambitious and needed project. And building a tunnel right into Union from Queens Quay, I think this is a worthy long-term investment, and I'll stick by being a champion of this one.
Yeah, no, I'll champion it right along with you. The city is lightening up on food trucks, vendors, and buskers. Dave Trafford, this is often a city of joyless scolds, so I'm encouraged that we're finding a way to make something as simple and joyful as a food truck easier to access.
And I heard you and Amanda Galbraith complaining about the buskers this morning, and I'm all team busker on this one, because I love it when you go downtown and there's some guy or woman there, they're doing their magic tricks or whatever it happens to be that they're doing, and that's what makes it fun to be a tourist in your own town, right? I mean, you can go downtown and enjoy it. You can have a hot dog. You can listen to some music, throw some change in the guitar case, whatever it might be. And it's the kind of thing where you can have this ongoing block by block street festival in a city where, we've had one of the worst winters that I can remember here in Toronto. So I'm just dying to have this stuff happen. Now, having said all this, it's going to City Council at a rather opportune time. And I just sort of throw this out there as the perhaps skeptical observer. But is this one of those things where it provides the mayor with all kinds of opportunities for photo ops and just, might be really useful in a campaign strategy? I'm just saying. It's one of those things, make you feel good, make you happy. Look what Olivia's doing for me today.
Yeah, Tim Hudak, you work in the neighborhood I live in. I don't know if you've come across the guy who plays Burt Bacharach tunes on a baritone.
No, but I'm gonna head there today. I'm looking out for him. Jeez, that's too good.
Get your pocket full of change, Tim.
Yeah, I'm with Trafford on this, John. I think this is exciting and it adds to vibrancy. I know when Deb and I are tourists in other cities, seeing a few buskers adds life to the streets. I like the notion of more choice, a little competition among food trucks. My only worry, John Moore, this is my second Simpsons episode reference of the day. Remember when Homer Simpson made his own car, right? The Homer. And I worry we will see a repeat of the disaster when City Council designed their own food truck, that hot dog cart that was like 5,000 pounds and didn't work. My worry, City Hall is going to mess this up. Open the doors, stay away, let it happen. Don't try to micromanage.
Clock's a ticking. I want to hop to a few other files. And Tamara, this is very much in your wheelhouse. Victims Services Toronto expanding a safety campaign ahead of the World Cup. It's called Ask for Angela. And effectively, there are certain venues where you go. And if you say, is Angela here or something like that, they know that you need help. And then they can separate you possibly from the person who may be holding you prisoner to a certain extent.
Yeah, this is excellent for victims and survivors of intimate partner violence and human trafficking. They know that, people often ask, why didn't she just leave? She wasn't handcuffed to the bed, or the door wasn't locked from the outside. And the psychological harm that goes into this sort of victimization is so immense that these chains are often invisible. So just to have people in public who are saying, like, we see you and there are people to help. I don't think that most victims would be calling that number or reaching out, but even if just one does, then I think that this is a worthwhile campaign. So I'm very happy to see it happening, and I hope it sticks around long past the World Cup.
Can't be easy to be a person named Angela, mind you.
Yeah, well, it's not Siri. At least it's not Siri or Alexa.
Listen, I know that you signaled Dave Trafford that you wanted to talk about Stephen Lewis, and he disappeared from provincial politics in the 1970s, so probably a lot of people aren't particularly familiar, but what an incredible figure, and notably, of course, father to the guy who's taking over the NDP just as of a couple of days ago.
Well, he was also the son of David Lewis, right?
Yes.
The leader of the NDP federally, and David Lewis was, the second leader of the federal NDP after Tommy Douglas?
Douglas, yeah.
And when I was a kid, my uncle Ian took me to a rally. It was where David Lewis was running here in Toronto, and I got to sit in the room with, I don't know, about 8 or 9 years old, whatever it was at the time of the election, and I was just enthralled by him at that age, and then did know that Stephen Lewis became the leader of the opposition here in Ontario. And everybody talks about what a great orator he was, and there's no question about it. But you and I and the rest of us, we tend to speak in, short phrases, maybe a sentence or two. We throw a verb in once in a while. Stephen Lewis spoke in paragraphs. I mean, that was the extraordinary part about the guy. But beyond his politics, it was the force that he had on the world stage, at the UN, in Africa, on the AIDS file. So, to limit what he did to provincial politics, I'm not suggesting you are, but that's a very small part of his impact. Nationally and internationally. So, boy, we need more Stephen Lewis in our lives, whether you agree with his politics or not, just his ambition and his passion for what makes this a better place, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all. Good to have you. Tim Hudak, Dave Trafford, and Tamara Cherry, and former Ontario Premier Bob Rae will be with us at 9:20 to pay tribute to Stephen Lewis.
What kind of a world do we live in where the life of an African child or an Asian child is worth so much less than the life of a Canadian child?
This is NEWSTALK 1010, CFRB AM, Toronto, a division of Bell Media and an iHeart radio station.
Now and Next is an Eye Contact production.